The National Human Rights Commission, in partnership with Open Society Foundations, commences a 3-day conference dubbed Accelerating the Effective Implementation and Monitoring of the Government White Paper on the TRRC Recommendations. The conference aims at engaging the stakeholders to fast-track and accelerate the implementation of TRRC recommendations. On 25th of November 2021, the TRRC officially submitted its final report to the President. On 15th of December, 25 additional copies of the report were handed over to the Ministry of Justice alongside a suggested list of public institutions, international organizations, foreign embassies, victims organizations, and civil society organizations that should receive the report. On 25th of May 2022, the government issued its widely awaited white paper setting out its position on the TRRC report. Speaking at the opening ceremony of the stakeholders' engagement on the government white paper, Mr. Emmanuel Daniel Juve, chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, says his office would establish a monitoring framework to keep track of the white paper implementation.
While the government takes steps to implement the white paper, the National Human Rights Commission is therefore positioning itself to monitor implementation of the TRRC recommendations in order to ensure that never again in the history of the Gambia will such human rights violation and abuses occur. So to this end, the National Human Rights Commission will establish a monitoring framework to systematically keep track of implementation, progress, and lessons learned. It will also produce advisory notes, scorecards, and quarterly reports to document the process.
Mr. Jagan Gray Johnson, Advocacy and Communication Coordinator, Open Society Foundation, says the fog of uncertainty and doubt must be lifted through implementation of the white paper instead of intentions.
As the chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission has stated, I believe that we have now reached a stage where the fog of uncertainty around the implementation of the TRRC recommendations must be lifted, and doubt, which kills more dreams than failure ever will, is also lifted from the incredulous minds as to answering the questions around the quest for justice for the victims of a tyrannical era which witnessed brutality and rights abuses under the Jammeh regime. It is this fog of uncertainty and doubt that must be lifted through implementation instead of intentions. And also, it is this fog of uncertainty that must be lifted through actions and not acclamation of promises made yet to be kept. Dear friends, this is where our journey in attaining justice for all victims, that juncture in that journey where the rubber must hit the road and momentum is triggered as a sign of fundamental shifts happening so that hope can be injected into the transitional justice agenda, where the TRRC report and the Government of the Gambia's white paper see rapid, deliberate, and unambiguous signs of implementation. After all, justice is actually binary. You either get it or you don't.
Mr. Aliu Jallo, Registrar of Ministry of Justice, says the government has already started the implementation of the white paper.
Allow me to take this opportunity to reiterate the commitment of the government to support all victims of human rights violations to obtain full redress for the violations they have suffered. For the victims who suffered human rights violations of the former regime, my office is committed to work to ensure that the indignity long suffered is addressed in a satisfactory manner. The government has taken measures to illustrate its commitment to implementing the accepted recommendations in the white paper. To this end, we have commenced the suspension of public officials adversely mentioned in the TRRC report. Recognizing that implementation of the recommendations carries a heavy financial burden, the government continues to engage with its partners to seek support for the post-TRRC agenda to augment funds allocated to this exercise by the government.
Meanwhile, Serafin Wakana, United Nations Resident Coordinator in the Gambia, highlights the contribution of her office towards the TRRC and the implementation of its recommendations.
For us, the UN, we have provided technical and financial support to the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission and to the National Human Rights Commission. Both institutions were supported through the peace-building funded Transitional Justice and Human Rights Project that was jointly implemented by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and the United Nations Development Program. Following the ending of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission and the submission of its final report, the National Human Rights Commission and other stakeholders, including the government and civil society, received support through a new post-TRRC peace-building fund project, and again will be implemented by OHCHR and UNDP. The UN has also provided additional support in the form of technical advice via recommendations to both institutions from the UN Human Rights Council Special Procedures.
The conference brings together national and international experts and partners involved in the work of truth commissions and transitional justice to discuss the government white paper, build consensus around the strategies for effective implementation, and look at ways on how partners can support the government implement the recommendations effectively. The conference would allow stakeholders and such partners who have been closely involved with the work of the Gambia's Truth, Reconciliation and Reparation Commission to engage in an in-depth discussion of the white paper. Reporting for Kerr, Fatou, this is London Cisse.